Snoke. Okay, cool. So we're recording and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And again, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or you can interrupt me. Totally fine. Okay. So yeah, we're looking at effective search strategies. And oh, just I always forget to introduce myself. I'm Sarah. I am the instruction outreach librarian here. So I do a lot of stuff like this and reference and teaching. So if you ever have a question, you can always reach out to the librarian email or to my email, and it's totally my job to answer you. So, all right, cool. We're going to jump in. So the first thing with searching is kind of knowing what you're searching for. So you want to pick a topic. And so the biggest thing I tell students, and really anyone with picking a topic, is being open to change. And that's primarily because sometimes what you think you want to write about is either going to be hard to research or could potentially just not be as viable as a topic for whatever reason. Maybe there's not as much to talk about. Again, maybe there's just not a lot of research out there. So kind of being open to adjusting your topic as you go is a good idea. Because research is an exploratory process, and so yeah, you can start with a specific topic in mind, but it can change as you research. I'm gonna just move this down here. And so the best practice is to just start with an idea and let the research shape your topic. I can't tell you how many times in my undergrad, especially in my grad program too, I would start with a topic and end up changing it halfway through my research because there just seemed to be more research on a certain different aspect of that general idea. And it was also oftentimes a little bit more interesting to me just because it was easier to look into and also just kind of more rich with ideas. So yeah, you just want to really keep that in mind when you're looking at things. And so, yeah, if you were at my narrowing a topic workshop last week, this is going to be familiar. But if you're not familiar with the topic that you're looking into, you can look up reference material on the subject. So you can look at websites and encyclopedias, and you can check class notes. And you might want to consider what controversies or point of debate are around your topic. And you want to think about your topic like a chapter in a book. I think this is really important to keep in mind when you're looking and trying to develop keywords and thinking about what you want to research. I know for me in my undergrad especially, I always was too I mean, well, it's kind of nerdy, but I was always too excited about my topics and I always wanted to kind of talk about too many things. And so I would kind of get inundated with search terms and topics and different strings of thought. And so I think it's important to really think about what you're writing is not the whole book. You don't need to cover the whole topic. You just need to cover an aspect of the topic or a chapter of the topic. So I find that kind of helpful as far as keeping things narrow. And so now we're going to talk about Boolean operators, but first looks like someone put something in the chat. So I will really quick stop sharing and peek at the chat, and I'll just edit this out. When researching, what websites would you say we should stay away from? Oh, that's a good question. So it kind of depends on what stage in your research you're in. If you are just kind of trying to get an idea of background knowledge, or if you're trying to get an idea for just where to start with your topic, I would say most things are probably fine to look at. I don't really tell people to stay away from Wikipedia if you're just trying to understand a certain subject or an idea, because it's really a great resource for that. And they're pretty well moderated. It's definitely not something you want to cite in your paper as an academic resource, because that's not what it's meant to be, but it is a great starting point. And we also do have quite a few encyclopedias available to use, either through our OneSearch or through our other subscriptions. So you have a lot of options there. I mean, I think if anything, probably just trying to stay away from anything that might be poorly researched. So, or poorly fact-checked would be my recommendation. So, blog posts, kind of things that are informal, maybe, you know, but they could be a good spark for ideas. It's just, you know, you definitely don't want to be like relying on that stuff too heavily if it hasn't been like thoroughly researched. And there are like some blogs and things out there on certain topics that are definitely probably pretty thoroughly researched, or like podcasts too, like some stuff like that. But yeah, you just want to like kind of be mindful of what the author's trying to do. But yeah, I mean, I'm like very pro uh, um, Wikipedia for like just I mean, I use it all the time if I'm looking at a topic and I'm just like, I have no idea what this is, especially when I'm helping you guys with research, because sometimes I just don't know like certain concepts for certain majors, because I was a history major and there's just such a variety of majors out there. Okay, great. So now we're going to go into Boolean operators, which are not always the most exciting to everyone, but they're important to at least have a basic grasp on. So Boolean logic basically defines logical relationships between terms in a search. And so the Boolean search operators are and, or, and not. And you can use these operators to create a very broad or very narrow search. So if you've been in any of my other workshops, you probably heard me talk about these. But now we're kind of going to actually like totally explain them. So and combines search terms, and so that each search result contains all the terms. So for example, if you're using travel in Europe, it'll find articles that contain both travel in Europe. And you're going to see in EBSCO, they kind of like bake Boolean operators in to the platform, so you'll see them in there. But yeah, this is especially good to keep in mind if you're searching in OneSearch or like Google Scholar or something like that, where like you might not be immediately in advanced search, or like in the case of Google Scholar, their advanced search is kind of not the best, so I don't usually use it. But yeah, keeping and in mind for those is great. Or is probably my favorite and most used Boolean operator other than and, because it's one that you can use to contain search terms that are similar. So for example, college or university, like those are two terms that are super similar. And if you're looking for articles on college, you probably also want to find articles on university. So it's really like great for synonyms like that. Another example would be like mental health and mental wellness, or mental health or mental wellness, I mean, or like children or adolescents, things like that. It's just good to use the or, because you're just going to capture more of like what could be related to your topic. And then there's not, which I'm going to be honest, I haven't used not too many times in my career as a researcher or as a librarian. It's definitely good to know and have in your back pocket, because basically it'll exclude terms. So if you want to look up stuff on television, but you don't want anything on cable, like maybe you're looking for the history of television or something like that, it's good to use not. Another example of not would be, for some reason, like I help a lot of the students in some of like the leadership grad programs, and a lot of times for some reason when we're looking at like management articles, we get a ton of like health management specific articles. So a lot of articles on like managing nurses or hospitals, things like that, which like would be great if they were in the health management like field, but a lot of them are managing like schools or offices and things like that, so it's not the most helpful. So a lot of times then I will like, you know, include not and then say like health or hospitals, things like that, just to kind of try and filter those out. I have no idea why so many of those come up, and it's, I mean, it's great, it's a robust field, but it's not always the most relevant to everyone's needs. So yeah, so I've used it, but it's not one I use a lot. So to make even better use of your Boolean operators, you can use parentheses to like kind of nest your terms. And when you're using something like EBSCO or JSTOR, you're probably not going to need to use this as much, because you can just kind of separate your terms by the search boxes. But if you're using something like OneSearch and you're not in advanced search, but it does have an advanced search option, or if you're in Google Scholar, I actually probably use these the most with Google Scholar. These are great to kind of, like, you can nest your synonyms together and then include your additional search term outside of the parentheses. And it just kind of is like a language that the search engine understands, and it'll get you better results. So good to keep in mind for things like that. You're probably not going to need to use them if you're primarily using EBSCO and JSTOR, things like that. But if you are kind of like dipping into Google Scholar, these are good to know. And truncation. So this is one I use a ton. It's also called stemming, and it's a technique that broadens your search to include like various word endings and spellings. So you will enter the root of a word and then put the little asterisk at the end. And so for example, if you put in child, it's going to come up with child, child's children, children's childhood, or like genetic comes up with all of those. And so that's just, it's like another way to kind of include synonyms, but not really because it's like the root of the word. So it's just a good way to kind of cover all your bases when you're doing a search. And even though it might seem counterintuitive to like broaden your search with something like this, it does really help with making sure you're getting stuff that's relevant and you're not missing out on anything just because you're not using like the right version of the word. Cool. So when you're breaking down your topic, when you're picking keywords, the first thing you want to do is break down your topic into the main ideas, and you want to develop keywords from there. So you want to kind of like chunk out your topic into different sort of sets of keywords, and those are what you're going to put into your search boxes when you're searching. And another thing you can do is consult with the thesaurus for alternative keywords, or if you're in EBSCO, it does that really nice predictive feature if you put an or, which is great. And when you find resources you like, you definitely want to look at the subject headings that are listed underneath it, because that can help you kind of further develop your keywords. I also recommend kind of just keeping track of the keywords that you're picking and using, and maybe kind of like crossing off ones that aren't working, or like writing down all the ones you like, just to kind of have those all in your head available to you as you're structuring your searches. Yeah, okay, cool. So now we'll do the sample kind of topic and search, and we'll just kind of walk you through sort of a very basic way of sort of starting to structure your search. And it's going to be scripted, so it's not going to be obviously like the most candid, but I have to do that. Otherwise, you would just be watching me like stare and go at my screen for a while in like a vague panic, and we don't want that. So I'm going to move this down here for me. Okay. So I'm going to go to Google, and so I think I had on there my example search was like kind of social media and mental health. But like first, so let's say I'm in a class and I want to write a paper on kind of like issues in social media. So one thing you can do is quite literally just Google like social media issues, because maybe your head is just empty and you can't think, you can't quite land on something you want to look at. So I can even just like scroll down here and see like there's this e-safety commission thing from Australia with a bunch of different issues, but maybe I'm looking at those and I'm like, I don't know, they're not super interesting to me. And then maybe I scroll down and I see like, oh, health issues, like, oh, that's interesting. And maybe I scroll down and I see social media and mental health, and that like kind of piques my interest. And I'm like, okay, like that's something that might like be relatable to me or something I'm interested in. So maybe I want to kind of explore that. So from there, you could go to our research databases page, which is under research tools on the library website. And maybe you just want to like kind of do a cursory search to see what's out there. So you can click on EBSCO, and for something like this, if you're not really sure what the best various resources are going to be, I would just say hit select all and see what you get and see what databases have the most hits. So you can click continue, and then from there, I'm just going to type in social media. Oops. Wow, how if I spell things right? All right. And then I'm going to add mental health. Wow, I never spell anything right on these. So mental health. And then as you can see in this predictive, a bunch of things come up. So I'm just going to add mental health or mental illness. I'm not going to get too crazy with the ors right now because I'm like kind of at the beginning. I don't really know what I'm going to find. And so now I'm going to hit search. And okay, so we have 12,000 results, which is quite a bit. If we want to just kind of narrow within this search, I always recommend just to click that peer-reviewed journal button under the limiter on the left side, and that's going to bring it down quite a bit. So now we're only going to be looking at the peer-reviewed journals, which is probably like what your professor wants you to use anyways. And then I'm going to add publication date to 2009. Honestly, for something like social media, you could probably even narrow it a little bit more depending on what you're looking at. For mental health, you're probably okay with a wider range, but considering how often it changes and like how many things have already like died within the last 10 years, social media wise, like you could definitely do like the last 5 years if you wanted to. So now we're at 7,000. And so from here, I would say you could just kind of scroll through. You definitely don't want to go through all 7,000 results, but maybe you just kind of want to see like what is out there. So I'm just scrolling down slowly and kind of reading the titles, because from here you want to narrow it maybe just a little bit more if you can. So I'm just looking to see like if any of these titles kind of interest me. And again, you're kind of thinking you want to have in mind like chapter in a book, not the whole book. So oh, that's kind of interesting. I didn't say the last time I did search people vlogging about severe mental illness. Interesting. But maybe, okay, like, so this one, number 6, maybe this one interests me because like, you know, more kids are using social media at younger ages. Like I don't know, for me, because I'm a little old, I didn't, I remember when Instagram started. And so, you know, maybe you're kind of curious about like, well, how is it affecting like kids today since they now have access to these things at much younger ages than we did, or at least I did. I'm not that old. I'm old enough. So maybe I want to add in like adolescent to my search string because maybe I want to maybe just focus on a certain demographic. And that's a great way to sort of narrow your topic and create keywords thinking about demographics or groups or issues. So I'm going to add in adolescent, and then I'm going to also use that or again to do teenagers or young adults. And this is where you could, if you wanted to, throw in a truncation for teen to get teen or teenagers, all those things. You can do that there. And now we're down to 1,928. So that's pretty good to start with if you're just sort of starting to create your topic and search terms. So from here, I would say you could definitely maybe just start reading some articles to get an idea of what's out there and what is interesting to you. Or you could kind of just keep scrolling through those titles to kind of see, again, what's relevant to you and what's interesting. Like for example, I mean, I was always interested in like gender studies, so this gender one might be interesting to me, and I would maybe consider looking into like, oh, like transgender issues or maybe issues surrounding like specifically men or women with social media. So that's like a great kind of way to go. You could look at a specific mental illness such as depression specifically, or maybe like anxiety, things like that. Or you could even like focus on a specific social media like platform, like maybe just Instagram. And something to keep in mind with this too, like if you were interested in looking up something about like TikTok, it's probably not going to be a lot of stuff out there because it's sort of new. I mean, I know it's been around sort of for a while because it started as like Musical.ly, I think, if I remember correctly, but you know, something like that, there's probably not going to be as much on. You could probably look up something about like other video platforms like Vine, maybe there'd be like a little bit, but even that was like pretty recent. So I don't think, you know, something like that you want to keep in mind as well when you're researching. But yeah, so it's kind of just an example, quick and easy of just like a sort of how you can start structuring your searches and keywords. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now and see if there are any other questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.